When was the last time you stopped, looked at your life, and asked yourself, is my anxiety just a symptom, or is it a sign that I'm ignoring something deeper, something I already know I need to change? I know this question might bother you, because it's uncomfortable, isn't it? Simply stopping and looking at the root of your anxiety can be terrifying, but what you don't realize is that true liberation doesn't come from running away from it, but from understanding what it's really trying to tell you. I remember being in that same position. Anxiety consumed me, trapping me in a cycle of fear and insecurity. But what I didn't know then was that anxiety was offering me something far more powerful than I could have imagined. It was offering me an opportunity for change, an opportunity to finally look within and begin to understand what I'd been ignoring, what I'd been avoiding. This feeling of being constantly on alert, of never being able to fully relax, is much more common than you think. Every day, millions of people wake up with a silent anxiety that consumes their energy and their minds. But what if this wasn't a simple glitch of the body or mind? What if your anxiety were a tool for self-discovery, a sign that there's something deeper demanding your attention? This is the key to understanding what happens when you stop running away. When you stop running away from anxiety, you start listening to what it's trying to tell you. When you start listening, instead of blocking it out, you discover a new world of possibilities. You might be wondering, but what if I never learn to control this anxiety? What if it controls me forever? I understand the fear, and that's why we're here. I'm not here to say that anxiety will disappear overnight. Make no mistake, the battle is real and sometimes it feels like it will never end. But what I can guarantee is that when you start looking at anxiety differently, it stops being your enemy and becomes a partner in your process of self-transformation. Jordan Peterson, one of today's greatest thinkers, says something profound about this. You don't run away from suffering. You choose the kind of suffering you're willing to endure. Anxiety often arises because you're trying to avoid a certain kind of suffering. But that suffering isn't the problem. The real problem is what you're not doing, what you're avoiding facing, what you're denying within yourself. So here's the big question. What are you avoiding? What's the real reason behind your anxiety? And most importantly, what would you do if, instead of running away, you started facing that anxiety head-on? I know it sounds difficult, but the power of facing anxiety is transformative. It's not about being perfect or having all the answers right away. It's about having the courage to look at what you fear and, little by little, dismantle the idea that anxiety is a prison with no escape. From this point on, you can begin to question your relationship with anxiety. Is it trying to alert you to something deeper? Something you've been avoiding out of fear or ignorance? When you stop running away and allow yourself to listen to anxiety, you'll discover it has more to teach you than you imagined. So I ask you again, is your anxiety just a symptom? Or is it actually a sign that you're running away from something that needs to be faced? The truth is, no one lives without pain. All of us, at some point in our lives, experience moments that test our patience, resilience, and courage. It's part of being human, but there's a big difference between the pain of growing up and the paralyzing suffering of anxiety. I know you feel it deep down, the feeling of carrying an invisible weight every day, a constant pressure, a discomfort, as if life is always out of balance, but you can't understand why. The pain of growing, though uncomfortable, propels us forward. It pushes us to be more than we were yesterday. It challenges us to be better, stronger, more aware. Every small sacrifice brings us closer to who we truly can be. But the pain that comes with anxiety, that chronic paralyzing pain, doesn't propel us forward. It holds us back. It makes us question our capabilities. It makes us feel powerless, as if we're trapped in an endless cycle of worry and fear. Most people aren't anxious because they have a chemical problem, as we're often taught. Of course, biology can influence the situation, but the root of anxiety goes far beyond that. What truly causes anxiety in most people is the feeling of living below their true potential. They know, deep down, that they're not being who they truly could be. They feel like they're wasting their lives on something that doesn't fulfill them, and it eats away at them from within. Anxiety begins to feed on their inner frustration, the fear that time is passing, and when they look back, they realize they haven't achieved anything significant. Each day becomes a struggle to simply survive. The thought that this can't be everything looms large over them, but they don't know how to break out of this cycle. I understand you. I've been there. The feeling of being trapped, unsure of how to move forward, looking to the future with a sense of helplessness. But here's the crucial point. You're not alone in this pain. We've all been there at some point. It's part of the human condition. But what defines who you become, what transforms this pain, is how you choose to deal with it. Anxiety is actually a reflection of your greatest fear, the fear that you're not living the life you should. You're afraid you're moving away from your purpose, that you're ignoring what truly matters. But this fear is also an opportunity. It's a signal that something needs to change. And the good news is that, while it may feel like a burden now, it can be transformed. You have the power to transform this suffering into something that will propel you forward. The question I want you to ask yourself is, what is this pain really trying to teach you? What is it showing you about your life that you've been avoiding? When you start to recognize this, anxiety stops being a prison. It becomes a signal. And when you pay attention, it begins to dissipate because now you're looking directly at what needs to be addressed. For a long time, I was also someone who avoided this confrontation. I thought anxiety was simply a problem that needed to be cured. But over time, I realized it wasn't the enemy. It was a way of alerting me to what I was doing wrong, to how I was disconnecting from my true nature. I wasn't living with purpose. I was trying to live in a way that didn't correspond to my deepest being. And that, yes, was what generated anxiety. So I need to ask you again, are you aware that the anxiety you feel is a reflection of something deeper, something you're avoiding? What do you need to face now that you've perhaps neglected for so long? When you stop running from the pain, you'll begin to see what's truly causing your anxiety. And that's when you'll discover there's no escaping what needs to be faced. You must take the first step toward finding peace and purpose again. Anxiety, therefore, is not just a symptom. It is a window into what is really happening inside you. It is the light that illuminates the darkness of what you are afraid to face. And only when you stop running from it will you begin to see what it has to teach you. When you look at your anxiety, what do you see? A weakness? A flaw? Or perhaps you see a reflection of something much bigger and deeper? Most people, when feeling the pressure of anxiety, tend to shrink. They feel small, powerless. But this happens because, more often than not, we're taught to view anxiety incorrectly. We're taught to believe it's something that needs to be eradicated, a threat to our mental health. And what this does is paralyze us even further. But what happens when you stop seeing anxiety as an enemy? When you start seeing it as part of the human process, as a tool trying to teach you something? Psychologist Jordan Peterson has a powerful insight on this. He tells us, you don't run away from suffering. You choose the kind of suffering you're willing to carry. This quote completely changes our perspective on suffering and anxiety. What he's telling us is that we can't escape suffering, but we can choose the suffering we want to carry. Anxiety, however painful, is a choice. It arises because we're avoiding something that needs to be faced, something we're afraid to confront. And what Peterson teaches us is that if we choose to face what's causing this suffering, the suffering itself transforms. It seems contradictory, doesn't it? How can something as painful as anxiety be transformed into a tool for growth? This is because the suffering of not facing anxiety, of trying to ignore or escape it, is much worse. When you refuse to face what's really going on inside you, anxiety grows, spreads, and begins to dominate. It becomes your reality. Now, you need to understand something very important. Facing anxiety doesn't mean eliminating fear. That's impossible. Fear will always exist. What you need to learn to do is live with it while taking action. You begin to realize that fear is a natural part of the process of growing, of becoming a better person. And anxiety, with all its pitfalls and limitations, ultimately becomes a catalyst for transformation. Peterson challenges us to look at suffering from a new perspective. He tells us that the choice we must make is between the suffering that comes from remaining stagnant, living a life without purpose, or the suffering that comes from confronting our own shadow, our fears and insecurities. And by choosing this second type of suffering, life begins to open up to new possibilities. Suffering, which seemed like a prison, begins to transform into a bridge to freedom. If this conversation has clarified anything within you, give back with whatever you can. A click, a subscription. It shows that it's worth continuing. I know this idea can be hard to swallow at first. It may feel like anxiety is pushing you into a dead end, but what you need to realize is that this feeling of helplessness is actually an invitation to break free from the prison you've built yourself. Yes, anxiety is uncomfortable, but it's through this discomfort that you're forced to grow. You're not being punished. You're being challenged to look at what you're avoiding, to confront what needs to be changed. Jordan Peterson talks a lot about the importance of facing reality. He doesn't propose easy or magical solutions. He reminds us that true change comes from struggle, from the courage to face fears and difficulties, and from the willingness to move forward, even when it seems impossible. When you stop running from anxiety, you'll discover that it can be one of your greatest allies in your process of self-transformation. It doesn't need to be seen as an enemy. It can become an ally on your journey to becoming the best version of yourself. So, ask yourself, what kind of suffering are you willing to carry? The suffering of not living in accordance with your true essence, or the suffering of facing your fears, your limitations, and growing from them? When you make this choice, you begin to realize that anxiety is not your enemy. It's a sign that you're about to become someone stronger, more resilient, and more authentic. I know what you're thinking because I've thought it too. We live in a society that preaches that feeling anxious is a sign of weakness, as if the person experiencing it is failing at something essential. We're constantly bombarded with the idea that you need to feel good all the time, and that any sign of discomfort is something to be eradicated as quickly as possible. So it's natural that you've convinced yourself that anxiety is something wrong, something that needs to be cured at all costs. But what if I told you that this view is completely wrong? What if, instead of treating anxiety as an enemy, you started seeing it as a reflection of something much deeper, something that can't be ignored, but rather faced? What if, instead of trying to escape it, you started listening to it more closely, to understand what it's really trying to tell you? Imagine this. Anxiety isn't a weakness. It's not a character flaw. In fact, it can be quite the opposite. It's a sign that you're at odds with something important within yourself. It could be a lie you're living, a decision you're putting off, or a path you're ignoring, even though you know deep down it's the right one. This may sound scary, and I understand. Facing your own truth is always uncomfortable because we often have to face our deepest fears. But that's what anxiety is doing to you. It's reflecting something you already know but have been avoiding. It's a silent cry saying, "Hey, stop lying to yourself. You're straying from your true path. It's time to face what needs to be faced." Now think about everything you've learned about anxiety. At some point you were probably taught to associate it with weakness, right? That feeling anxious is something to be suppressed, ignored, or medicated. But the truth is that anxiety, when you learn to see it differently, is like a beacon. It's not something to be extinguished, but something that illuminates the path you're avoiding. Today's culture pushes us to seek instant happiness and the absence of discomfort. Anything that causes us anxiety is seen as a threat, something to be eliminated as quickly as possible. But this approach only strengthens anxiety. Running away from it doesn't make it disappear. On the contrary, it becomes stronger, more intense, and more difficult to deal with. So why not try something different? Why not stop running away and instead learn to face head-on what it's trying to show you? Here's the crux. True courage isn't about eliminating anxiety, but learning to live with it. And you don't have to do it alone. When you stop treating anxiety like an enemy, you begin to realize that it's guiding you to something greater, something more authentic. It's like a map, leading you back to your true essence, your true path. But to do that, you need to stop running from it. Jordan Peterson, once again, teaches us a powerful lesson. He tells us, life is suffering. The question is not whether you will suffer, but how you will suffer. What he's trying to tell us is that anxiety, like suffering, is inevitable. But how we deal with it makes all the difference. Instead of trying to eradicate suffering and anxiety from our lives, we need to learn to live with them, learn to use them as tools of transformation. They are not our enemies. They are the silent teachers who teach us, step by step, how to evolve. So, stop for a moment and ask yourself, what is my anxiety trying to tell me? What is it trying to show me about my life, about the choices I've made, about the path I'm on? Instead of fighting it, start listening to it. It's not a flaw, it's a guide. And perhaps it's pushing you toward a new beginning, a beginning you can no longer ignore. When we talk about anxiety, many people are simply dealing with the symptom. They try to suppress it, ignore it, or simply see it as something to be fixed with medication, quick meditations, or distractions that distance them from what's really going on inside. But the truth, and this is something you must deeply understand, is that anxiety isn't just mental. It's existential. It's a reflection of what you're denying, what you're avoiding, what you don't want to see but know is there. This is where most people fail to understand the true nature of anxiety. It's not just a mental health issue. It's at its core a warning that something inside you needs to be addressed, that some part of your life needs to be reconfigured. Anxiety is a call for you to stop and pay attention. It's asking you to look deeply within yourself and notice what you've been ignoring. And when you start listening, that anxiety begins to lose its power over you. I know this can be difficult. I know how painful it is to stop and look within, especially when you know there's something inside you haven't been facing. But here's the crux. Anxiety only has the power you give it. When you refuse to listen to it, it grows, multiplies, and takes over. But when you start paying attention to what it's really trying to tell you, you begin to realize it's not your enemy. It's a message. And messages shouldn't be ignored. You've probably wondered why you feel this constant pressure. Why, despite everything you do, you can't shake this feeling that something isn't right. The answer is simple. What you're experiencing isn't in alignment with your inner truth. Anxiety is the expression of a disconnect between who you are and who you're being. You may be forcing yourself to live a life that doesn't match your true self, or you may be avoiding a path you know you need to follow, but are afraid to begin. When you allow yourself to listen to your anxiety, you begin a process of deep self-knowledge, and this is the first step toward healing. You begin to realize that the answer lies not in silencing your mind, but in confronting the life you're living and asking yourself, am I being true to myself? Am I truly living according to what I know is right? Anxiety in this sense is a reflection of how disconnected you have become from your true essence. It is a mirror of your lack of authenticity. That's what makes this process so powerful. When you begin to listen to and understand anxiety, you begin to know yourself more deeply. You begin to ask yourself what's out of order in your life. What areas have you been neglecting? What aspects of yourself have you been ignoring, even though you know they need to be addressed? Anxiety isn't a punishment. It's a call to action, an invitation for you to take control of your life and begin living more authentically. And here's the big revelation. When you start listening to yourself, when you start honoring this message that anxiety is trying to give you, you put yourself on the path to transformation. Anxiety stops being a prison and becomes a guide. It stops being an enemy and becomes an ally. And in doing so, you begin to realize that living authentically and in alignment with your inner truth is not only possible, but it's the only way to truly overcome anxiety. So stop right now. Take a deep breath. Ask yourself, what am I ignoring in my life that's causing me this anxiety? Where am I being dishonest with myself? When you start listening to this inner voice, you'll realize that anxiety no longer has the same power over you. It will begin to dissipate because you're finally facing the cause. And when you address the root of the problem, anxiety will begin to lose its power. The path to overcoming anxiety isn't linear. There's no magic pill that will make it disappear overnight. But there is a path, and that path involves connecting with your truth. It involves listening to what your anxiety has to say and stopping running from it. This process won't be easy, but it's the only one that truly brings freedom. Now is the crucial moment. When you start listening to your anxiety, when you finally decide to face what it's trying to tell you, there's another challenge you need to face. And this is something Jordan Peterson speaks to with a clarity we can't ignore. Face the chaos. That's where your potential lies. What he's trying to say is that true transformation only happens when you allow yourself to embrace the chaos of your life. Anxiety, which may seem like an uncontrollable monster, is actually a reflection of this chaos you're afraid to face. Every time you choose to run away from it, you're running away from the opportunity to confront the internal chaos that's hindering your growth. I know this sounds scary. Stepping into chaos, into the unknown, is terrifying, but that's where the true potential for transformation lies. What you call anxiety is often a reflection of the fear of confronting something you've been trying to avoid, the aspects of your life that are out of control, the parts of yourself you're afraid to face. Peterson tells us that running away from anxiety only makes it stronger, and that's where many people make the mistake. They try to distance themselves from the uncomfortable feeling. They distract themselves, medicate themselves, or keep themselves busy to avoid having to face what's really at stake. But the only way to truly transform anxiety is to face it head-on. It's by stepping into the dark, looking at what you fear, and facing the chaos with courage. This process of facing anxiety is like diving into the unknown, into turbulent waters where fear and discomfort await. But instead of running away, you allow yourself to feel the fear, and it is in this confrontation that you begin to gain power over it. The key here is that you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to have all the answers. You just need the courage to take the first step. Peterson teaches us that chaos is not something to be avoided. Chaos is the fertile ground for transformation. If you look closely, you'll realize that anxiety, which seems like an enemy, is actually leading you into this unknown territory where your greatest growth lies. Anxiety is a reflection of what you're afraid to face, but what you don't realize is that by facing it, you're getting closer to who you truly are. It's normal to feel fear. It's natural to feel uncomfortable facing the darkness within yourself. But at this point, the issue isn't fear itself. The issue is what you will do with it. Will you allow it to control you, or will you use it as fuel to change your life? Courage is not the absence of fear, but the willingness to act despite it. I know anxiety can feel like an insurmountable wall. It can seem insurmountable, like a force crushing you. But it's in that moment, when you're at your lowest, when you're closest to chaos, that transformation truly begins. Chaos, contrary to what you might think, is not your enemy. It's the ground where your true potential grows. It seems difficult, I know. It seems impossible to face something so big, something so overwhelming as anxiety. But the truth is that this feeling of fear, this feeling of being lost, is a reflection of a gigantic potential waiting to be awakened. Chaos is the space where you will find the courage to change, the strength to rebuild yourself. When you face anxiety honestly, without running away from it, you get closer to what truly matters. You begin to reconnect with your true essence, with the part of you that has been ignored for so long. The path won't be easy, but it will be profoundly liberating. So ask yourself, are you ready to step into the chaos? Are you ready to face your greatest fears and use that anxiety as a tool for growth? Because in the end, you'll discover that true freedom only comes when you allow yourself to enter this unknown territory. And it's there, in the chaos, that you'll find your greatest potential. Anxiety is like a monster in your life, a monster you try to ignore, trying to move on as if it weren't there. But the more you ignore it, the more it grows. It starts small, but soon becomes a giant creature full of sharp teeth and hungry eyes. And by ignoring it, you feed it, you strengthen it, to the point where it can swallow everything you love. Have you ever noticed this? When you avoid what really needs to be faced, whether it's a fear or an unresolved problem, it doesn't go away. It grows. Every time you look away, it grows bigger. And then, you reach a point where you feel like you no longer have control. Anxiety begins to dominate your life, like a ravenous monster, ready to devour everything you have. The problem is that as you try to escape, the monster doesn't disappear. It only grows stronger and more frightening. The secret, the truth no one tells you, is that if you don't look the monster in the eye, if you don't stop to face it, it will grow and eventually consume you. But if you muster the courage and face what you fear, the monster begins to wither. It loses its strength, because the power of fear lies in its control over you, in its power to make you avoid confrontation. When you decide to face what's terrifying you, that power dissolves. This is what anxiety wants to teach you. It's not just a symptom of the mind. It's the manifestation of something you're trying to hide, something you're avoiding. It could be a decision you need to make, a fear you need to confront, or a part of yourself you've been trying to deny. This anxiety, which feels like a threatening monster, is simply alerting you to something that needs to be confronted. If you don't, it will continue to grow. But when you stop running and look this monster in the eye, you'll realize it's not as big as it seemed. Its power lies in your perception. It only has power when you believe you can't face it. When you truly face this fear, it begins to lose its grip on you. And in that moment, you begin to break free. You begin to take back control of your life. I know this may seem complicated. I know the idea of facing your greatest fears may seem unbearable. But remember this: you have the strength to do it, no matter how big the monster seems. No matter how big your anxiety seems right now, the reality is that by facing it, you begin to regain control, and that's how you win the battle. The monster loses its power the moment you decide to confront it. Now think about your own life. What are you ignoring? What are you avoiding that's just growing in power, waiting to be faced? What do you need to face now to make the anxiety monster lose its power? It could be a difficult conversation, a necessary change, or an action you've been putting off. But when you finally summon the courage to act, the monster will begin to wither, and you will be stronger for it. True freedom from anxiety doesn't come from trying to avoid fear. It comes from facing it head-on. You will no longer be dominated. You will be the warrior who courageously defeats the monster that has been feeding on your inaction. This doesn't mean fear disappears completely, but it does mean you begin to reclaim your life. You begin to take control, not of your anxiety, but of your own story. Now ask yourself, what are you letting fester, hoping it will go away on its own? What do you need to face head-on now, before the monster becomes too big for you to handle? The answer to this is the key to your next step. By taking control of your life, you'll realize that true power lies not in running away from anxiety, but in using it to transform yourself. You've made it this far. It wasn't easy, I know, but now, deep down, you feel something different, don't you? Something starts to shift inside you. It's as if you've suddenly paused in the chaos and realized there's something more, something that can no longer be ignored. Something inside you, long dormant, is now awakening. This is the turning point. So far, you've been through a series of difficult moments. You've faced the pain, looked at what you were avoiding, and confronted your anxiety head-on. Perhaps it was an internal battle. Fear, discomfort, and doubt all tried to push you away. But now, in this moment, you're beginning to realize that you're stronger than you ever imagined. You're no longer running from anxiety or trying to stifle it. You're learning to live with it, to accept it, and most importantly, to use it to your advantage. It is here, at this turning point, that you begin to become who you truly are, not who others think you should be, or who you've tried to be, out of fear or obligation. No. Now you begin to become the person who has the courage to face the truth, the person who is willing to live authentically, even if it means experiencing discomfort. The path is no longer about avoiding pain, but about choosing the pain that is worthwhile. At this moment, true transformation begins to happen. When you begin to act despite your anxiety, when you choose to live according to what's truly important to you, that's when you begin to feel the power of your own transformation. I know you may still be afraid. Perhaps the voices of doubt still echo in your mind. What if I fail? What if I'm not enough? What if I continue to be anxious? These fears are normal, but now you understand something fundamental. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is acting despite fear. It's not about waiting for anxiety to disappear. It's not about seeking a state of eternal peace. Courage is taking a step, even if you tremble inside, because you know you're doing what's right for you. By doing this, you begin to realize that anxiety, which seemed like a prison, becomes the key to your freedom. Anxiety is no longer a burden, but a tool for growth. No matter how difficult the journey seems, you now understand that each step, each challenge, is bringing you closer to who you were truly created to be. You are no longer trapped. You are breaking free. And do you know the beauty of all this? It's not about having a magic solution, nor about eliminating all your fears at once. True transformation lies in learning to live with your fears, with your anxiety, and still moving forward. That's what really matters. Not the fact that you'll never feel anxiety again, but the fact that you now have the tools to deal with it in a healthy, powerful way. Now look at yourself. What has changed within you in this process? How can you look at your life now and realize that you are stronger than before? What you've done so far has been courageous, yes, but you know that the most important thing is yet to come. The journey continues, and with each step you are becoming more than you were yesterday. You are becoming the version of yourself that isn't afraid to face chaos, that isn't afraid to be who you truly are. This is the turning point, the point where you choose your own path, where you decide that anxiety will no longer control your life. You are stronger than any fear. And this, my friend, is just the beginning. Now that you've made it this far, you might be wondering, okay, what now? How do I move forward with all this? I understand, and it's a legitimate question. There's no magic formula that will make anxiety disappear overnight. No, real change doesn't come that way. There's no magic pill or instant solution. What you've just experienced so far has been a deep dive into the truth. And truth, while powerful, doesn't bring instant transformation. True transformation comes gradually. It doesn't happen with the snap of a finger. And I want you to understand this clearly and profoundly. True change is an ongoing process. Every step you take, however small, is a step forward. Every day you choose to face anxiety instead of running away from it is a day of growth. And these small steps accumulate like drops of water that over time begin to shape a rock. Change, then, doesn't come in huge leaps. It comes subtly but steadily. What you've begun to realize, and what you will continue to realize, is that true transformation isn't about trying to get rid of anxiety, but about learning to live with it healthily. When you begin to see anxiety not as a prison, but as an indicator, a sign of something deeper, it loses much of its power over you. And that's how transformation happens. You're no longer controlled by it. You begin to use anxiety as a guide, something that pushes you toward a more authentic, more real life. And yes, I know, you're looking ahead and asking, but will it be easy? Will it be quick? The answer is no, it won't be easy. It won't be quick. But that's not a bad thing, because worthwhile transformation requires work, and that work isn't a burden. It's a process of growth. And every step you take, every time you stand up to face anxiety head-on, you're becoming a stronger, wiser version of yourself. True change isn't magic. It requires patience, dedication, and most importantly, it requires courage. Because every time you choose to face your fears and anxieties, you're getting closer to who you really are. You're taking off your masks, freeing yourself from the chains that bind you to the past, and allowing yourself to live more authentically. And there's something profoundly powerful about this process. What you'll begin to notice as you continue walking this path is that anxiety begins to lose its hold on you. It doesn't disappear, but it becomes an ally. You learn to live with it, to use it to guide you, to let it be a signpost to the aspects of your life that need addressing. And each time you confront one of these aspects, you become stronger, more capable of handling the next challenge. You don't have to be perfect. There's no perfection on this path. There's only the act of continuing, step by step, facing anxiety, facing chaos, and in doing so, becoming the strongest version of yourself. That's what really matters. It's not about being free from anxiety. It's about learning to live with it, to master it, to use it as a tool for growth. When you understand this, you'll realize that true freedom isn't the absence of problems or difficulties. True freedom lies in the ability to live with them without being dominated by them. When you begin to face your fears and anxieties head-on, without trying to hide or escape, you begin to realize that true strength comes from within. There's no magic formula, as I mentioned, but there is a path, and that path is the one you're on now. And the most incredible thing, my friend, is that you've already taken the first step. That in itself is a victory. You're already in motion. And now, you're ready to start seeing the fruits of this journey. One step at a time. It won't be easy, but it will be genuine. And in the end, it will be more valuable than any quick or superficial solution you could seek. We've reached a crucial point in this journey. What you now possess is something that, simply put, could be called wisdom, but it goes far beyond that. What you hold in your hands is the key to real transformation. And at the same time, you may be wondering, how do I move forward with all this? How do I put into practice everything I've learned so far? I understand the doubt. It arises because the transformation you experienced wasn't quick or easy. It requires commitment. But I want to give you a powerful quote that, in itself, sums up everything you need to know to continue your transformation journey. Jordan Peterson says, "You don't overcome anxiety by trying to feel better. You overcome it by becoming a better person." This phrase is the key to everything you're going through. True transformation doesn't happen when we simply try to get rid of anxiety, as if it were a bad thing we need to avoid. No, true change happens when we choose to become a better person, someone who has the courage to face their fears, someone who doesn't let discomfort overwhelm them, someone who is willing to face anxiety head-on and use it as a tool for growth. I know it's not easy. I know you've been there in those moments when anxiety seemed all-consuming, the chaotic thoughts, the paralyzing fear. But now you have the key. It's not about being perfect. It's not about eliminating all fears from your life. It's about choosing to face each one. And that's when you start to become a better person. Not because the anxiety disappears, but because you learn to live with it. You learn to grow despite it. And over time, you realize that this anxiety no longer has the same control over you. When you become a better person, you begin to see anxiety not as an obstacle, but as an opportunity. Each time it arises, you'll remember that it's just an indication of something deeper at play, a chance to grow. Each time you feel overwhelmed, you'll remember that there's no greater strength than the courage to keep going. Peterson teaches us something profound here. Life will never be free of challenges, difficulties, or moments of anxiety. These moments are inevitable. What we can choose is how we react to them. We can bow down, surrender, or we can rise up and use these challenges as springboards to something greater, using anxiety as a tool for growth. This is what it means to become a better person. Now think about this. Where in your life are you letting anxiety control you? Where are you still running away from what needs to be faced? Instead of seeing anxiety as a burden, you can choose to see it as a sign that it's time to change, to take a step forward, to go beyond what you imagined you were capable of. You've made great strides so far. With each chapter you've passed, with each lesson you've learned, you've become stronger. But most importantly, you now have a new power. You're no longer at the mercy of anxiety. You're bigger than that. The path you're on now is the path of an inner warrior, someone who stands up to fear and says, I will face this. I'm not a slave to my anxiety. I'm the master of my journey. And here's the secret you need to carry with you. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to keep moving forward, one step at a time. And as you move forward, you'll notice that anxiety loses its power over you. You'll realize you've become stronger, more resilient, more authentic. In the end, true victory isn't about eliminating anxiety. True victory is about learning to live with it, growing through it, and moving forward despite it all. Now I want you to stop for a moment and really take a deep breath. Look at what you've just been through, what you've just learned. Every word, every concept, every lesson was a step toward something much greater. And now, the real question I want to ask you is, are you going to carry all of this with you? Are you going to let this transformation remain just words? Or are you going to do something real with it? The answer you give to this question will determine how committed you truly are to the process. It's not the end of the road. It's not the end of the journey. It's just another step. And most importantly, you have the power to decide how this will unfold. You've already faced the chaos. You've already faced your anxiety head-on. Now, you can choose to continue or leave it all behind. You can continue living the life you've always lived, or you can choose something more, something that resonates with the true essence of who you are. But to do this, you need to take action. It's not enough to feel. It's not enough to understand intellectually. You need to act. You need to get up and start applying everything you've learned here. Start now, start small, but start. Don't put it off any longer, because your life, and the way you live it, is waiting for your decision. If what you just read touched your heart, if the words made sense, if in some way it brought light to a dark place inside you, share this. Maybe there's someone you know who needs to hear exactly what you just learned. Maybe someone is on edge, just waiting for a word that could change their life, and that word could be yours. Jordan Peterson reminds us of a powerful truth. The right words at the right time can save a life, and your presence here today can be that word. You can be the difference. You can be the spark that ignites the flame of transformation in someone else. You can be the turning point for someone trapped in the darkness and unsure of where to look for the light. And when you share, you're not just helping someone else, you're also solidifying your own journey. Because what you've just learned here, this process of coping with anxiety, this process of growth, isn't something you should keep to yourself. It's something that, when shared, multiplies. Every time you share your experience, you strengthen yourself and the world around you. I want you to think about this. Perhaps by sharing, you're creating the opportunity for someone else to make the same transformation you did. Maybe you're the guide they need to take the next step. I know you won't do this for fame or recognition. But by doing so, you'll realize that the simple act of sharing will create a chain of change. A chain that goes beyond you. It goes beyond what you ever imagined you were capable of. So, I ask you now, are you ready to continue this journey? Are you ready to use everything you've learned and move forward with courage, authenticity, and truth? Are you ready to take the next step, not just for yourself, but for everyone around you who needs your light? Because in the end, true change comes from within, but it also spreads outward. And by choosing to be the best version of yourself, you inspire others to do the same. Now, I want you to stop for a moment and think about who might benefit from this message. Who in your life needs to hear these words right now? Don't wait. Share them. Let this chain of transformation begin with you. You have the power. Don't let it pass you by.